Let's begin. Today we're going to talk about reading good literature, and we're going to look at two main ideas. We're going to look at what to read and how to read. So we're going to look at what to read, how to assess what is good literature, and then number two, I'm going to suggest how to read to improve your English. I'm going to give you a specific example on how I do it to improve my language skills, and then you can adopt some of these. But before we get started, we need to understand what is good literature. What does this mean? And so this is what I mean by good literature. Number one, good literature inspires. Now this means a lot of things. You enjoy reading it, it's pleasurable, and it inspires you linguistically. You want to improve your language. When you read it, you want to get better. So anything that inspires you is good literature, but it has to have these other two elements. So number two, good literature, in my view, uses natural English style. So you want to expose yourself to an English that is a natural native style in whatever area of the world that might be. All right, and number three, it introduces new phrases and words for you. That is to say that it's a little bit above your level of English so that it challenges you linguistically or lexically, and then in terms of syntax or style. So you want to read a little bit above your level, but not too far above that you get lost and frustrated, because this has the opposite effect. It demotivates. If you read something too far above your level, you become demotivated because you think, I'm not good enough. And you don't want to do that. You need to know what your level is and read a little bit above that. I'm going to show you how the books you can read just a little bit above your level in a minute. But you want to read a little bit above your level to challenge you. This is a learning process. All right, what should you read? My general suggestion is to read genres you enjoy. Do not read just to learn. If you have an exam, obviously, but if you're learning English, you have a large variety of reading materials to choose from. Choose things you naturally like to read. Don't make this process more difficult than it already is. A lot of you have written me, it's very interesting, asking me, what should I read? What do you recommend? And honestly, that question is a very personal question. I'm going to show you today how to arrive at good books that you like to read, but I'm not going to give you specific recommendations except on one slide, just my own personal recommendations because everyone asks me. So I will give you one slide of recommendations, but in general, I'm going to show you how you can arrive at what to read and then how to read. So let's begin. The resources. So we're going to talk about different resources. This is an excellent website that I want to recommend to everyone. It gives you literature in your specific level of English. So we have pre-intermediate here in the screenshot, but there's A1, A2, all the way to C2. And they even have B2 plus and B1 plus. So it's broken down really effectively so that you can find out what literature is in your sort of level of English. Now, this is literature that is sort of global or well-known English language literature that you can, read for profit. So this is going to be very helpful. Now, so you can check the website later. You can take a snapshot. This is very helpful here. Next, what about websites? Now, websites are tricky because you have to understand who's writing this. So you need to understand who the author is before you can judge, unless you're an expert, before you can judge the quality of the website itself. So my recommendation, when you're looking at a website, ask yourself who is the author or who are the authors of the website, and then do a bit of a background search on their qualifications. What have they written before? Where have they studied? What is their reputation in the field, if any? This is important in determining the quality of the language in the website if you're not able to determine it on your own. So this is really important. Find out who the authors. If the authors are not listed, and a lot of times they're not, then you have to be very careful unless you're, very knowledgeable in a particular area. All right, let's move on. How to know if a book is well written. My advice, it's the advice I use when I'm writing, and it's the advice I'm going to give you. Read book reviews. Read book reviews. These will give you an indication of the quality of the book, but I have some qualifications of this statement. What are the best sites for book reviews? Now, Amazon is the biggest site. It's not the best, but it's the biggest site. So what that means is you can always find, or generally always find, a book review of a book you're interested in. Here you can see in the screenshot, I've circled the number and the star ranking. We have 7 reviews, and the composite score, composite means average, score is 4 stars out of 5, which is like 80%. Now you can click on that and then read the reviews. Now the positive is Amazon has a lot of reviews of books. The negative is you don't know the people who are writing the reviews. Now when you get good at reading reviews, you can tell if this is a good review or not. But in the beginning, you might not be able to tell. So the quality of the review can vary. And so this is something that is a little bit you have to be aware of. Now, other sites that you can use to for book reviews. Goodreads is global, probably the second most popular on this list. Followed by 3, we have number 2, 3, and 4, which are sort of middle range. Mainly dealing with fiction. So if you're interested in a fiction book is something that, we sort of create. These are fantasies or stories that authors create in their mind. And then finally, number 5, I'm going to talk about later. It's the one I use for my academic work. And this is called JSTOR.org. Org stands for organization. These have book reviews of scholarly books. And so these are more trustworthy because in the biggest journals, they ask experts in the field to review the book. So you can trust at least that the information is accurate. It might be biased, but it's going to be written by an expert. So JSTOR is probably the most reliable, but it only deals mainly with nonfiction. Nonfiction is sort of the sciences and the arts, the social sciences, humanities, etc. So these are academic books that they're reviewing. All right, if you have any questions, save it to the end and we'll continue. How to tell if a book review is trustworthy. Can we trust the book review? So here are a few of my suggestions on this. Background of the author is critical. What's their education? Where were they living? If they're talking about politics, it's really important to know where they're from because that might bias their view of the political events. Is he or she an expert? And you can find that out with a Google search, and why they might be biased. So often you've got to be very careful mainly with political works. Or some religious works. What do other experts say about the author? And then finally, it's always a good idea to read 2 or 3 book reviews, and book reviews are very short. That's the beauty of it. You can read a short book review and understand the whole book, and then decide, do I want to read it or not? So this is a great time saver. A book review is a great time saver. But if you're really serious about a book, then I would read 2 or 3 book reviews to get a consensus. A consensus is sort of a general opinion about something, and not trust just one book review. Finally, another good source are big newspapers. Any big newspaper in a big city is going to employ very highly qualified writers. The BBC, on the English side, obviously, The Guardian as well, perhaps, and then the New York Times. Although the New York Times has limit, if you give them your email, it has a limited access number of articles per month, I think. The BBC is generally free. So these are great sources of reading interesting articles. And if you go on the BBC, you can read about the arts and humanities, travel, science, politics. They have everything. And their articles are not generally very long. So they're really good sources for good English reading. So big newspapers. All right, now journals. Journal articles are shorter. And this, I think, this is, I think, more manageable for most readers. Now, this is generally going to be intermediate, upper intermediate, and advanced. This is who I'm talking to at the moment, and especially those advanced readers, because some of these are difficult. The LRB, which is what I subscribe to, I consider it the best English language journal around in existence. It's long essays on books. So they review books, but they give you short histories as well. It's just so interesting on all topics: fiction, nonfiction, science, a lot on literature, a lot on modern politics, but not exclusively. They have everything. Now, I pay a subscription. It is rather expensive, but you can register and have 2 to 3 articles free a month. And these can be quite long articles, 4,000 words. This is a long article, which is why I like reading these, because most articles are much shorter. But the longer ones you can develop, you have a chance to actually read something of substance and then profit from the reading experience. And if you want to challenge your English at the highest level, the LRB is the journal you want to subscribe to. You can do it for free. You don't have to have the pay option. And the same with the New York Review of Books. It's also limited number of free articles per month. They're much shorter. So if you don't want to read as long, they're 800 to 2,000 words. So what is that? 2 to 5 pages. So that's an option, the New York Review of Books. And there are other differences between these. I'll give you one. The New York Review of Books is less critical. They're generally more positive towards books. The London Review of Books lets the reviewer be more critical of the book. All right, if you have any questions about those, feel free. Now, I'm going to tell you a few that you probably have never thought of, but are excellent sources. So international book prizes. Any international book prize will obviously be dealing with the best books of that year in that genre or category. So most of us, of course, like fiction. We like to read stories. One of the top fiction book prizes is called the Booker Prize. This is a UK-based prize. It's international. And I've given you a snapshot here of the website, and then of course you can see the web address. They have a short list of the top fiction books of the year. Not only, but mainly fiction is what it was known for since its inception. Inception means start. Since its inception in 1969. And so go there. You can get a short list every year of the top fiction works for the Booker Prize. And then those are guaranteed to be good works of literature that you can read and challenge yourself not only with language, but also style. These are stylistically very engaging at the highest level and are great stories to read. these are some of the best in the world for that year. So this is a great source, and you don't need to read book reviews because these have already been vetted. Vetted, V-E-T-T-E-D. If something is vetted, it's already been checked. There's been a controlling process. Controlled. So it's been checked. It's already been vetted. You can trust that it's good. All right, I hope that's clear. And I want to move to one of my final points. And this is one almost no one would have thought of, is the Holberg International Prize. So this is a prize given to the top academic in their field. Well, any academic in any field that's made the greatest contribution. Now, why do I mention this? Because some of us are interested not just in fiction, maybe some of us are interested in science, in literature, in art, in history, in geography. The winners each year come from different backgrounds, different fields. Like the two pictured here, I think you have cultural studies and art criticism. And so you have different fields. So if some of you have a very eclectic means, various reading interests, or you like to read things more serious, this is for you. Go on there, find the winner for each year, and then read some of the works they've published. You can find them on JSTOR, and on JSTOR you get 6 free articles a year. You can also find their books generally on Google Books. And this is great. This is literature at the very, very highest level, and it's super interesting. And so that's a guaranteed interest. If you have more sort of eclectic or maybe academic inclinations, an inclination is something like a predisposition. You have you're interested in it. To incline is to do this, and that shows interest. My inclination is towards nonfiction, which is my inclination. I like to read nonfiction, but here are my suggestions for some of you who want a hybrid or a mix between fiction and nonfiction. Here we have historical fiction, which is fiction, but it's based around historical events that actually happened. Hilary Mantel and Robert Graves are 2 of the most prolific writers in the field. Prolific, P-R-O-L-I-F-I-C. Prolific means of great abundance. They've been very productive and very well known. Second, you have philosophical fiction. This is a great work. If you're sort of interested in philosophy and fiction, this is an amazing book that's one of the all-time bestsellers, Sophie's World, by a Finnish writer in 1991. It's sold millions and millions of copies. It's available online now, I think. Philosophical fiction, Sophie's World. It tells the history or the different philosophical movements and thoughts through the story of a little girl who asks very simple questions. It's a great read. It reads very quickly. And finally, I love biographies, but anything written about a person I find super interesting. Now, this is different from autobiographies because autobiographies are written by the person and they might not have a good writing style and they might be very biased. But biographies, if they're well-known biographies, are written by great writers generally, and very interesting reads. So these are my 3 recommendations for you all if you're looking for reading material. Now, how to read to improve your English. This is going to be an interesting point here. How to read to improve your English. Now, we have here a very small chart. I apologize about this. We have on the vertical graph time in hours, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then horizontally, we have the type of reading that you can do. So there are 3 options. You can read for enjoyment, which is that third of the 4. You can do a mixture, or you can read to learn. So reading for learning English takes the most time. A hybrid, a mix between reading for learning and enjoyment takes obviously a middle time, 4 hours, let's say. And then 2 hours, I'm giving just example numbers here. Enjoyment is the fastest because you read uncritically. I mean, you note new words, but you don't stop and try to learn new words. I want to talk about the first one, reading for learning, because this is where I think some of you want to be. I'm giving one example from Sophie's World, that book that I mentioned earlier. I apologize, the screen's very small, so I'm going to have to look here on my laptop. But I've underlined or highlighted a sentence that you might read and think, wow, I want to learn the words in this sentence, and I want to learn the style of this sentence. And so this is very interesting. So let me read it to you. Clutching the 2 envelopes in her hands, Sophie ran through the garden, crouched down on all fours, and wormed her way through the hedge. Hedge is grass. So there are potentially a lot of new words here. Clutching, if you clutch something, you grab it tightly with your hand. Crouch down, this is when you kneel down. On all fours, that means hands and knees. Wormed your way like a worm on the ground. And then the hedges are generally like grass. Now, so we have possibly four new words couched or placed in an interesting sentence stylistically. So here's what I do. I ask myself, wow, have I ever written a sentence like that? Am I capable of writing that? If I haven't written a sentence like that and I like the sentence, and this is critical, if I like the sentence, but I've never written a sentence like that, or I've never spoken like that, then I take that sentence, I note it down. This is where it takes extra time. But we're doing a lot of things here. We're learning 4 new words, potentially 4 new words, and we're learning new style that we can incorporate in our speaking and in our writing. So I write this down, and then later I read it. And after a few times, it becomes my own. This style, maybe not the same words, but then I can construct a sentence that has an introductory participial phrase. That's what this is called here. Clutching the 2 envelopes in her hand. That's an introductory participial phrase. That means it starts with ing, clutching, running. We can say running around the park. She, da-da-da. So that's an introductory participial phrase. If you've never written that before, this is a great sort of learning opportunity to expand your English. Secondly, it has a compound predicate. This is a compound predicate sentence. That means there's one subject, Sophie, and 3 main verbs. Ran, crouched, and wormed. So this is a rather complicated sentence with a compound predicate. If you've never written compound predicates, or in this case, we have 3 main verbs. If you've not done that, this is a really interesting sentence for parallel structure. And so this is another reason to write this down. And then as you read it 1 or 2 or 3 more times, or possibly more, if this is really new, you might need to read it more. This will help you to improve, not only expand your vocabulary, but also your syntax, how you develop your ideas and present them in English. This is what I do, and this is what I'm suggesting you do. Read for pleasure, but when you see an interesting sentence with interesting new words, note it. Would I stop? If I were you, I would not stop at every single new word, at every single sentence. I would just do sentences or long phrases that grab your attention, that contain new words, so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, that you can have multiple purposes, learning new words and learning new style in the same phrase or sentence. I hope that's clear, but that's how I think you can read for profit and improve your language skills. All right, you can ask questions about that later. I want to have a wrap up and say this. There are 4 final points I want to make. Number one, you find good literature from the opinions of others, what others say. Number two, you determine the credibility, the believability, the worth of that opinion. Determining that is a science. You can look it up. You don't have to trust the opinion. You can look at the author's background, their achievements, and what others say. So you can actually determine whether it is trustworthy or not. Number three, reading for purpose involves actively taking down words, phrases, and sentences, and then repeating them later. And finally, this whole process should be enjoyable, and it's predicated on the notion that you are reading something you enjoy. Do not read material that you don't enjoy just because it's good, just because everyone says it's interesting. You will not learn as much. You learn more when you're reading something you enjoy, and then you find a sentence that you enjoy. You say, wow, what a beautiful sentence with beautiful new words. I can learn 4 new words and new style. This is how you want to learn English, in my opinion, when you're reading. So you read for pleasure, but you stop at key moments and you have a learning break or a learning moment. All right, for those who came late, I apologize. This video was interrupted because of a slow internet connection. I don't know why that happened, but it did. I'm gonna upload both parts of this video after this, and you will be able to see the video on my YouTube channel, which is the same name as my Instagram. All right, now, are there any questions? Let's see if there are any questions. Yeah, someone's mentioned blogs. Blogs are very interesting. But blogs, of course, you have to understand who the blogger is and know what they're producing. So this is obviously very important in understanding the background of the writer of the blog. Very good. Okay, very interesting from Martha. My dad says English in Hollywood movies is 0 to literature level. So Hollywood movies have a low grade of English, literature a high grade. In general, Hollywood movies or movies in general aren't using great syntax, great style. It's good if you want to learn how people speak, sort of normal street language, but it's not beautifully crafted prose. This comes with the reading of literature. So I learned my style, how I phrase words, or how I create phrases or create concepts from literature, not from movies. But if you want to of course, improve your listening skills, movies are very important. All right. Thank you, Amal. Yes, it is. What is a book review? A book review is a discussion of a book where an author gives a general comment on the book. This is what's good about the book. This is what's not good about the book. This is what's positive. This is what's negative. So you understand what the strengths and weaknesses of the book are. So that is what a book review is. I will save the live. All right. I'm looking here. Someone's asked me about my most recent books. I'm reading history, so you probably don't want to know what I'm reading at the moment. I'm currently reading economic history in Italy in the 19th century, because I'm writing a biography. I'm writing a book at the moment, and I'm writing one chapter of that book is on economic history of Italy. So I'm reading very economic things at the moment. So I've got a lot of numbers swimming in my mind. So that's what I'm reading at the moment, but I'm reading lots of different things. But at the moment, I'm reading this. In fact, I just received another book from an Italian library. So I'm reading Italian in Italian at the moment. All right. Where to find your presentation? It will be on YouTube. Podcasts are very interesting. I didn't mention podcasts just because we're talking about reading. We're not going to talk about listening. I think this is devoted to reading at the moment. Audio is different. This is going to be a different, you're not going to pick up syntax, or you're not going to learn as many new words. Listening, you do that more actively and I think more effectively when you are reading. Oh, wow. Now, this is a great question by Sule. Sule asks about my favorite biography. Do you know, I have a fascination for, in the past, military, political, and just famous people in general, and how their careers and their lives go up and down. I find this really interesting. And also how their lives end. Not all of them end on a rise. Some of them end going down. I just find the ups and downs of people who've been successful and then not successful. I find that interesting because I want to know why. I guess at some level I'm trying to learn from their experiences. But I find anyone who's been famous in even actors and actresses, sports figures in the US I find particularly interesting. I find political figures super interesting. So any major political figure, very interesting. Historical figure. Very interesting. I don't think I have one particular biography, but there have been so many different interesting lives. I don't have a favorite book. I've been blessed to read many good books. So someone's asked, what is your favorite book? Thank you, Yoga. I don't have one. Some of the most inspirational books I've read were by my Oxford professor, who I don't think's listening, but his son might be. My Oxford professor wrote a few books that I still look at today, admire, and I become inspired. So for me, good literature means you get inspired. You read it and you go, wow, I want to write like that, or I want to learn those words. So if you are inspired by what you're reading, that is a good sign that you're reading the right material. If you're not inspired, then you're probably either you're not enjoying it or you're reading the wrong material. And I would stop, unless you have to do it for a test. And in that case, for school and university, you're never reading for inspiration. You're reading because you have to. All right. I will save this live. Someone's asked, will I save the live? Yes, I will. And I will put it on YouTube after I put the two videos together. Thank you very much, Zakaria. Again, someone's asked about my favorite book. I don't have a favorite book. I like reading history. I'm a historian. I write history. I like reading history, and I find it very, very interesting. Someone's asked about other languages. Yes, so I've had to learn other languages to write the history I write. So most of the major European languages, I suppose, I can cope with. All right. Now this is interesting. This is dealing with skim reading. Now this is a very controversial subject. I am not a fan of skim reading. Now, to say I'm not a fan of something means I don't like it. I'm not a fan of skim reading. I'll tell you why. Because in order to be an effective skimmer or skim reader, you have to be an effective reader. But what my experience suggests is that most people who start to skim read for the IELTS or the TOEFL or whatever, aren't good readers in the first place. And so they become bad skim readers. So you develop very bad habits. My suggestion is to become a very acute or very good thorough reader first. Then you have the right to become a skim reader. But 95% of the people should not be skim reading because they're not good readers in the first place, which means you will almost never be a good skim reader, despite what everyone tells you. I am not a fan of skim reading unless you have a very firm foundation in how to read. Reading is not just reading line by line. It's understanding how ideas and concepts fit in relation with others. It's using analysis to understand weighing different points within an article. So this is very complex. My advice, learn how to read critically first. And you know what? You can learn how to read critically by reading book reviews. By reading good book reviews, you understand how some of the best thinkers think. And then you start to think like them. Copy them. That's how I've learned to become better. Is you read people you respect, you admire how they think, you admire how their brain functions, and then you say, wow. So then you start to think in ways that they think. And that's how you become a better reader. Only when you achieve a certain proficiency in reading would I suggest skim reading. Otherwise, you are a bad skim reader and an even worse reader if you do skimming first. If you take these out of order, it's bad news long term, in my view. So be very careful about skim reading. All right. Hello, Algeria. Nice to hear from you. This is an interesting question. It's not related, but I'm going to make it related to this topic. How do you improve speaking skills? Do you know I've improved my speaking skills by doing what I mentioned earlier, by taking phrases that I love from books or articles and then repeating them? Do you know that I start repeating some of those same phrases? Let me see if I can repeat in my own words the phrase from the book, the Gardner book I mentioned earlier. Having read a lot of books, I remember lines faster. I use some of the phrases that are involved, and I profit from better syntax. Do you see? I've used the same style that Gardner used in that book. That sentence started with a participial phrase and then a compound predicate. And I've replicated that just now. So as you get better, you can use those constructions instantaneously. And this is how language becomes an art. It becomes creative, and then you can create things that are beautiful. And you start to see language in a very different light, in a very different perspective. It's not just about communicating. It becomes on how you communicate, the art of communication. I understand for most of us, we're just trying to communicate full stop. So I understand that, but I want to suggest to you that there are greener pastures, that there are more interesting levels later. So keep improving, and then you can enjoy the process of trying to create and use the language to express your ideas. That's essentially what you're doing. You're using English to express in words what you're thinking. And how you do that can be very artistic, can be very beautiful. And you learn this artistic creativity from books more than any other genre, more than movies, more than podcasts. Books, reading is how you learn that the best. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see here. I've mentioned newspapers, political biographies. I'm writing a political biography at the moment. So yes, it should be out maybe in a year or so. 19th century political biography. All right. Now, this is a great question from Irena. Thank you. Is it useful to read books with old English vocabulary? I'm old school, so I am 100% for this. Now, some people might say it's very antiquated. Antiquated means too old. I think it's beautiful. The best English literature, the best English style, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, scholars, would be 17th and 18th century English literature. This is the high point. But also, of course, this is the period of Shakespeare in the early 16th century, but also 19th century. If you read Henry James, for example, he's a beautiful stylist. But there are others. If you read 19th century classic British, I'm going to say British, American writers don't come into their own. Come into their own means mature. As a country, we don't have great writers with the exception of Walt Whitman and a few. America doesn't actually produce great writers until the early 20th century. Ernest Hemingway, etc., has a very unique style. If you want to read about a unique style of language and the long serial sort of sentences that he uses, Ernest Hemingway is classic. He had his own style that's beautiful to read if you like the style and the stories. I love 19th century style. Sort of Henry Jamesian. So I'm a little bit old school, but guess what? These sentences and this syntax and these words are still in currency. In currency means they're still used today. Less frequently, but they're still part of the English lexicon. So I'm going to tell you, Irina, go for it. You can do it. All right. Sorry. So I'm trying to. I will give more lectures. I go. Sorry about this. I'm not actually sure what's happening here. Very good. This is a very good question. Which kind of book is better, fictional or non-fictional, for improvisational language? I think, in general, fiction writers are perhaps known as being better writers. They're more creative. They use more colorful adjectives because they can create things that don't exist. So there's a bit of a bias here because I write nonfiction. But in general, I think it's understood that fictional writers are the best pure writers in the English language. So if you want to go to the Booker Prize list and look at some of those writers, you're going to find some of the most fertile prose. Fertile is rich. Fertile is an agricultural term. Fertile. The most fertile, rich prose will be in fiction. This is in general. Skim reading. I'm sorry, someone asked what is skim reading. I was talking about it and didn't define it. Skim reading is when you read very quickly and trying to get just the main idea. That's what skimming is. You skim over it very quickly, or you just look at the, I'm sorry, I'm struggling here with all of these different. Do you like Indian history? Yes, I do. Very interesting. Of course, this period during the British Empire with the Rye is interesting, even though I know that it's not always happy for the Indians. This colonial history. I think I've gotten stuck here. All right, I think we're nearly finished. Could you give me the YouTube channel? The YouTube channel is my name. It's my Instagram name. All right, I'm looking here for any other questions. The live will be saved. All right, I think we're finished. If you have any individual questions, you can ask me. I am going live next Wednesday, every Wednesday at the same time. I apologize. I was late today. We have internet problems. I don't know why. But thank you all for waiting around and enduring to the end. I hope this was a profitable few minutes for you. I hope you're inspired to read something that inspires you and that causes you to improve your English to the next level. Thank you all and see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.